Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to be doing a little talk about is jailbreaking safe or not. With the newest release of unc0ver for 13.5, I thought that maybe this would be a topical thing to go on about. So we're going to explore the ideas between what jailbreaking fundamentally does to your device and if those modifications can be considered safe. What is safe? We're going to have to define the term safe because it's going to be semantically important, right? What safe means to you and what safe means to me in terms of this talk are pretty important because it can mean different things to different people. Safety is going to mainly be in terms of your personal data for this talk. Things like your photos, your documents, keyboard inputs, login information for your online accounts, things like that are what we're going to be defining as a safety concern. Any kind of vulnerability to any of those are what we are worried about. So what you can be sure of, any jailbreak that you're installing is not going to brick your device. Your device isn't going to explode. This isn't going to physically affect your device in any way. Both of the two most popular jailbreaking tools right now, unc0ver and checkra1n, are both non-persistent. They're semi-untethered and semi-tethered, meaning that when your device is shut off, it's going to go back to essentially a stock state. All of your jailbreak files are still there, but they're dormant, and any additional security flaws that you may have introduced by jailbreaking the first time are no longer there until you re-exploit your device. So safety concerns, right? Your phone physically isn't going to run into any issues, but checkra1n itself does say that you could potentially, right, in a very uncommon situation, have some data loss with a bug with their jailbreak tool, right? Like what if something goes wrong and it accidentally wipes your photos or something? That is very unlikely. The tools, like I said, unc0ver and checkra1n are both designed by very smart people and teams of people who have plenty of experience writing something like this. A check to make sure that you're not doing the exploit improperly is definitely something that's included with both of these tools. So they do recommend, however, back up your data before you're going to be using checkra1n, or I would recommend the same for unc0ver. Just make sure that you have everything that you could potentially lose from a data corruption or something saved somewhere off of your device. So what is safe? On a stock iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, you are in a safe environment. What that means is your applications are in a sandbox. Entitlements for applications are things like, can it access your photos? Can it access your files? Can it access your camera? Things like that are all brokered in the sandbox. You have to ask a service for permission to that. That's when you open up your Instagram app. If you slide to the left right after installing it, you need to authorize it to have camera access, either for forever or every time it should ask you to see if you still want to give it camera access. Inside of the sandbox, those kinds of permissions are brokered properly, so you will have to authorize an application before it's allowed to actually go and fetch things from outside of itself, right? Sandbox also prevents your applications from knowing other things about your system, like it can't read system memory, it can't persist over different apps, right? Like other than keyboards, alternative keyboards like Gboard have kind of a sandbox escape in a way because they're persistent across other applications, but that is actually noted inside of iOS. Then signing integrity, prevent unauthorized applications from executing. On a stock iPhone without any additional certificates installed, if it wasn't downloaded from the App Store or signed by Apple, the application will not run on your device. This can be circumvented with alt stores by installing a third-party certificate of some kind, which are usually enterprise certificates that have been lifted, or they paid somebody to sign a whole bunch of apps with this enterprise certificate. So unauthorized apps not being able to execute is also important for security. Apple isn't the only company that does this. If you have an Xbox or PlayStation 3 or Nintendo Switch, they all have signing integrity in the same way to prevent unauthorized applications from executing on the platform. This, in iOS's case in particular, Apple's App Store, they have an auditing process for all applications. If you submit an application, it usually takes a couple days for it to go through an auditing process. Somebody combs through your code, make sure that the application doesn't have any kind of unexpected exploits inside of it, right? You're not going to be able to download an application that has a jailbreak exploit or some kind of sandbox escape, kernel escalation privilege thing from the Apple App Store because they're audited by a human being. So I think that it has happened in the past, but this is like years and years ago. And having your device up to date, having the latest security patches. What do security patches do? They fix vulnerabilities, and jailbreaks are exploiting vulnerabilities, usually in a chain, to escalate themselves up to being able to manipulate the kernel in a way where they can circumvent code signing or sandboxing, things like that. So having the most up-to-date version of iOS is the most secure thing to be doing, right? And most jailbreaks require you to be on a downgraded version of iOS. Apple, every time that they do release a new version of iOS, they do state what has been patched. And sometimes that can even lead to jailbreaks in the future for older versions, because Apple has specifically said, we fix this vulnerability that maybe wasn't well documented or something, and then you can look it up on Project Zero and come up with some way to exploit that. So there was a jailbreak for 13.5, and it was heavily obfuscated. They unc0ver said that they went through a lot of effort to make sure that the exploit itself wasn't easily read by Apple, but they fixed it in like a day and a half, so it really could not have been that sneaky of a way to do it. But 13.5 was exploited. 13.5.1 you can't jailbreak anymore, and that was like within a day and a half. So having the latest version is more secure. If a jailbreak can't be developed for it, that likely means that, well, the multinationals and corporations may have some kind of backdoor that they keep to themselves and don't document that's still exploitable on 13.5.1, but as of right now, there's no publicly available exploit for it that you can use to jailbreak or backdoor it or something. So being up to date is good. If you jailbreak, what have you done? You've effectively destroyed the sandbox. This screenshot down here is from unc0ver. unc0ver says that they utilize native system sandbox exceptions. Security remains intact while enabling access to jailbreak files, which I think what they mean is Instagram or YouTube or something. Any app that you download from the App Store is still going to have to ask you for permission to use certain system things. So they're not patching out that API. Like they could effectively, because it's a kernel read write, they could rewrite that part of the kernel where it asks for permission to just say accept, instead of having you be prompted, right? Like it could just automatically say yes. So what I'm thinking that this means, it's not stated anywhere, is that stock apps are still going to have to ask for permission, and they really shouldn't be able to get past that. But stock apps are not your concern when you're jailbroken, so I don't really think that that's a real secure thing to do. Being able to escape the sandbox means a couple things, right? So if you download an app from Cydia or any of the other installers, a Cydia app of unsigned code could theoretically just download all of your pictures and send them up to a server someplace. Like even something as stupid as a theme or something could have a bundled service inside of it that goes through and uploads all of your keystrokes or something. And having it be not have to sit in a sandbox and ask for permissions will allow something like that to happen. Breaking out of the sandbox also lets you hook into apps. So if you have like a plugin for Instagram, which I have, or a plugin for YouTube or a plugin for Twitter, Any kind of plugin is an injection, right? So that's also a side effect of having the sandbox broken, but that also allows for things like, what if you have a banking app installed and some application that you downloaded off of Cydia has a plugin for that and exports your cookie to their server someplace, and they use that to steal your bank account or something, right? So having a broken sandbox is definitely a flaw. There have been issues in the past from inside of the sandbox where you're allowed to do something unexpected, right? So with the Sockpuppet exploit, you didn't have to even escape the sandbox for that to do arbitrary read-write to the kernel. So you can go check out that post. I'll have a link in the description. It's very interesting, but the sandbox can have issues inside of it. If there was an app that was exploiting the sandbox, it wouldn't make it into the App Store. So that's why you need to download unc0ver or other jailbreaks from an alternative store where they're not being audited properly. But sandbox escapes are a pretty big security concern and open you up to having remote access on your device that persists through a respring or something. Not a reboot, but a respring. Whenever your device is in a jailbroken state, it could be remote accessed. Theoretically, you'd have to install something malicious. Signing integrity, the entire point of a jailbreak in the first place, right, is to run unsigned code, meaning you're allowed to get unintended functionality from your device. Unsigned code also means that you're going to be able to make use of exploits. All the jailbreaks that we have today all allow unsigned code, obviously, because it would be pretty useless if you couldn't. You can get around signing integrity with alt stores, so that's like Ignition or Funbox or whatever. Alternative things that you can go to their site, download a certificate, install it to your device, and then download apps from them, which is also a security concern, but not quite as bad as jailbreaking because it's not going to automatically have privilege escalation. It would need to be built into the app, but it's not totally unlikely that that could happen. But signing integrity is defeated. You can run unsigned code on your device. That's what you want out of jailbreaking anyway, but it is inherently less secure. Being up to date, like I said, if you want to still use unc0ver, you have to be on a later version than the current most up-to-date version. But it wouldn't really matter in the first place, because being jailbroken even on the most up-to-date version, you've already opened up so many security flaws in your device and given everything elevated permissions that you're far less secure than it wouldn't even matter if you're on the latest version and still jailbroken. You've just opened up so many flaws intentionally, and that's what you wanted to do, to give apps permission to modify your springboard or switch what your control center looks like. I have an always on display. All that kind of stuff is definitely far beyond the scope of what a normal app can do, and I'm not up to date, so I'm double screwed. So it's not safe. Well, you need to understand what your personal threat model is, right? Like if you're a multinational or you're somebody who stores incredibly sensitive information on their phone, you probably should not be jailbreaking your phone. Or if you care a ton about your banking, like I think most people use some kind of a banking app on their phone, you are exposing yourself to additional risk. And that is irrefutable, right? Like you are intentionally circumventing security restrictions put on your device for either aesthetics or functionality or something, but you are foregoing security for that benefit to yourself. Your phone is very likely your most secure device right out of the box. That's just due to the permission model in the first place. If you Android's the same way with sandboxing. If you download an app on Windows and you double click it, it already has access to all of your user files and things. It already has access to all your keystrokes. Most of the time it still has access to your camera. Windows 10 has added those little toggles to say prevent apps from using my camera, prevent apps from using my microphone. Those kinds of permissions are a step in the right direction. I think macOS now has more permissions saying like you downloaded this from the internet, it wasn't signed by Apple. are you sure that you want to run this? And you go to the security center and say yes. Then when it's running, it says it wants to access your documents folder. Are you going to allow that? And then you have to hit yes. So it's getting more and more secure, but that's already common on all mobile operating systems, right? On iOS and Android, they both had these permission systems for quite a while, and they are good at protecting your data, right? Like if you download a flashlight app, that's the common example. Why does a flashlight app need your access to your photos and your GPS and your cell phone number and your whatever data, right? Like having permission models like that where you're allowed to selectively allow and revoke what you want a certain app to use is pretty cool. But having a sandbox escape where you don't have to broker those kinds of connections anymore and you're just allowed to use whatever you want is definitely not quite as safe. And by jailbreaking, you're intentionally foregoing that kind of safety mechanism that's already in your phone. Jailbroken iOS devices are an extremely small install base. There aren't, there's a lot of people that are into jailbreaking and like using their phone like that, and as seen by like their Twitter accounts and the YouTube videos that get installs. The Reddit's pretty popular. There are a lot of enthusiasts that still jailbreak, but it's a very small target, right? Like if you wanted to spend your time effectively and try and target as many people as you could with some kind of malicious software, going for an iOS jailbroken iOS devices is really not a large surface to go after. You'd rather do Windows, right? Because there's a lot more people doing just as sensitive things, not carrying it around with them. So if you wanted to, track somebody's location, then yeah, a jailbreak based exploit probably would have some benefits there. But in terms of a bad actor who wants to make money or hold people at ransom, the device of the iPhone is probably not your first choice. And most people that are making iOS jailbreaks or are making tweaks or involved in the community, they're just nerds, right? They're not after your personal information. They don't want to steal your pictures and upload them to some server someplace. They don't want to steal your keystrokes or your banking information. They just want you to have more fun with your iPhone, and it's a fun reverse engineering puzzle for them to figure out how to do a jailbreak, right? Like the incentives aren't to destroy somebody's life or get remote access to their phone. The point is, here's some additional functionality for a device that you bought, right? Like it's a community of people who are looking out for your best interests, essentially, not looking after making the money off of hacking you. So it is safe? I don't know. I've jailbroken my iPhone for quite a long time, and I'm low risk threat model. I do online banking on my phone. I do a ton of things on my phone. And yeah, if I ran into an issue where like my camera was hacked or someone was tracking my GPS location all this time, yeah, I'd feel exposed and vulnerable. But to me, it's really not that giant of a risk. But if you're somebody who has things on their phone that are incriminating, or you don't want your location to ever be tracked, there are ways around that too that are not even jailbreak related, but being at a higher risk for something like that is something that you're exposing yourself to. Me and many other people have been jailbroken for years and never had any issues. I have no memory of any malware ever being installed on my phone. Perhaps it could have been in the background and I had no recollection of it, but I've pirated things off of bad repos. I've done everything that there is to do with jailbreaks. So, being a dumb kid, just downloading everything, never had any issues at all. So for me, anecdotally, I don't think that there's a tremendous risk of your files being stolen or something like that. That has never happened to me, but perhaps other people have their own stories of horror. And current jailbreaks, semi-tethered and untethered, they have a benefit inherently in themselves too, is that they're not persistent over a reboot. So if you restart your phone, if you are a jailbreak user, you like using your phone jailbroken, but you have some kind of high risk task, like entering your banking password or something, you can just reboot your phone, go and do that, and then re-jailbreak after you're done with what you've done, because any kind of remote access tool or something that would be installed on your phone through a malicious means would be rendered useless if you just restart your phone and your phone's not exploited when you're doing sensitive information, right? Like, that's still a pretty it's a pretty edge case scenario, but it is something that you could do if that's a concern for you. Obviously, semi-tethered is more of a problem there, because you'd need to bring your phone back to a real computer to run the exploit, whereas a semi-untethered, you can just open up the unc0ver app or whatever it is that you're using to re-jailbreak. So I'm confused. Wait, is it safe or is it not safe? Like I said, it depends on you, right? Like, if you are jailbroken, you do open yourself up to having malicious software installed on your phone that is impossible with just using the App Store, right? Like, there is no foreseeable way that anything could do keylogger. Well, you could install a third-party keyboard that logs your keys, so that one's not a great example. Like, if you're installing Gboard or Swipe keyboard or something that replaces the stock keyboard, it could theoretically be uploading your keystrokes to the web, but that's something that it tells you when you're installing a keyboard. Whereas on a jailbreak, you could install a theme or a tweak or something that includes a keylogger, and you would never notice. A screen recorder that is persistent, or like a screenshotter that's always checking out what you're doing on your phone and sending it back home someplace, is kind of creepy. Obviously, camera and microphone remote access are really scary, and those are, from, if you ask me, on current versions of iOS, basically impossible without having an unsigned app or using some kind of third-party store to install things, right? Like, an audited app that came through the App Store having a remote camera and microphone is extremely unlikely. But what about the FaceTime bug? Yeah, it's been patched. There might be other bugs like that, but still, that's you are safer being unjailbroken than jailbroken in that kind of situation. And banking information exporting, like, a tweak could be injecting itself into any application that you have. There's no permission model for it. On a rooted Android phone, you still have to grant things super user, which I've thought about as, like, maybe that would be a good thing for iOS jailbreaking, but really, if you have an exploited device, things could already circumvent that. So having your banking information exported, yeah, that's kind of scary as well, but hopefully it's whatever app you're using is programmed in such a way where even if somebody did have access to your tokens or something, they would not be effective across a different device, right? You're kind of relying on your banking infrastructure being developed properly in that situation. And also that there's nobody willing to invest the time into that, because we're starting to go into tinfoil hat territory, right? Is somebody really going to make some kind of cool jailbreak tweak that you would intentionally install that secretly steals your banking information? Nah, probably not. But it is still scary that things like this could be happening on your device and you wouldn't even know it. It'd just be going on in the background. It doesn't have to ask you for permission. It doesn't have to tell you that it's accessing your camera or accessing your bank app to check out what files are in there. It's just kind of scary, right? And being on an unmodified device, you don't really have to worry about that stuff. So best practices, like I said, I'm still jailbroken. I do really enjoy my phone in its current state. I've got ad blockers for Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. I don't have to worry about a bunch of dumb stuff. Face unlock automatically goes up, and I have like an always on display. There are so many things that I really like about the workflow of my jailbroken iPhone right now. I like it so much that I have a secondary Android phone, and me as a pretty big nerd, you'd think the customization of the Android phone would be better, but really my jailbroken iPhone has far more customization than even my rooted Android phone does right now. I'm a huge fan of jailbreaking in its current state right now. So best practices, if you're going to be downloading an IPA release, meaning like it's a precompiled app that does some kind of sandbox escape, you're not running a tool on your computer to jailbreak, you actually have some kind of an app on your phone that you tap, hit run, and then your phone goes into a jailbroken state. So for this example, unc0ver, I would recommend downloading from the official release and signing it yourself with Cydia Impactor. Even though they are most of the time available on alt stores like Ignition, you are opening yourself up to the additional security risk of it being repackaged and unsafe, right? Like most of the bigger ones probably have a good enough reputation that you can trust them, but you are going to be safer by downloading the official release from the official developer, signing it yourself. That way you know exactly what it is, and it came from the most reputable source in this situation, right? Like maybe the developer goes rogue and does something bad, but you're more likely to have a good experience if you're just signing it yourself than if you're using Ignition or Funbox or something, right? And probably stay away from pirate repos and cracks. Those people have already shown themselves to be morally in a gray area, right? Those kinds of repacks and cracks and things are more likely to get you into trouble, in my opinion, right? Same with on a desktop computer. If you're downloading pirated games or something, you're opening yourself up to higher risk of being hacked or having keyloggers installed on your computer, right? That's just, the kind of person that goes and makes a crack or a repack of a game or a pirated software is more likely, in my opinion, right? And this is, I don't think there's any peer-reviewed studies on this, but you're putting yourself at a higher risk, in my opinion, than just using the stock repos and paying for things. And that's basically it. So hopefully you learned something. Again, in my opinion, you are undoubtedly opening yourself up to a higher risk of having your data stolen, or being, installing something that you don't like, some kind of malware, in a jailbroken state, and that's irrefutable, right? There's no way that you can go around saying that it's just as secure if you're intentionally circumventing these safety mechanisms that are in place for a reason. But I still do it, and I think that I'm going to be remaining doing it. I have an iPhone 10, so I have the unpatchable boot ROM checkra1n exploit, so I'm probably going to be remaining jailbroken for as long as I still have this phone. And like I said, I really enjoy the workflow of it. So is it safe? Depends on what you're doing with your phone. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next time. Peace.